Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the first Flyway Community Office Hours for 2020. So for those of you who joined us last year, welcome back. We've been running these sessions publicly now for a little while. We've been tweeting about them, sharing the recordings with the community, and we've had some good feedback on them. So hopefully you guys are finding them useful, becoming more familiar with the format. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, I'll run through some quick introductions. So my name's Tay. I'm the product marketing manager for Flyway, and I'm joined today by the rest of the engineering team for Flyway. We've got Johnny, Julia, Alex, and Mikkel. So I'm going to be handing most of the session over to those guys, and I'll keep this bit brief, but just for a bit of context, the aim of the session is to show off to you, the community, the work we've been doing in the past couple of weeks and towards the end of last year. Tell you a little bit about what's coming up in Flyway, specifically in Flyway 6.2. And then we had some feedback from the community through our end of year survey that people would find it useful to see kind of some more tutorials in these sessions. So this is our first attempt at that. Mikkel will be doing a tutorial as part of this session. And then, of course, as always, we'll have some time for questions at the end. So just as we go through, if you have any questions, submit them through the GoToWebinar question box, and then we'll make some time at the end to answer them. Yeah, I think that's all kind of the admin we need to get through at the beginning. So Alex, am I handing over to you first?
Yep. Right, so we are almost done with everything we need to work on for 6.2, and then it has pretty much 4 headline features, one of which we showed last time, which is the colorized output for the CLI, allowing it to be disabled completely or to be enforced for scenarios where our auto detection doesn't quite do the job. Then we have 3 other things we've worked on. One of them is validating the naming of migration scripts, and that's useful mainly because the migrations have to sort of satisfy a pattern. The name of the migration has to satisfy a pattern, and sometimes you can get that pattern wrong without realizing. So an example is that for version migration, you have to have a uppercase V followed by a number, and then 2 underscores, and then the description. And if you, for instance, only put 1 underscore, that migration wouldn't be seen as a migration. So we've introduced an option to allow you to have more strict validation of that name. So if we find a script that ends with the suffix that you've configured, which by default is .sql, but that doesn't satisfy the pattern for the name, will fail fast and then allow you to catch those errors early. And so hopefully that will help some people, especially when you're getting started, to get used to the naming and to make sure you don't make any mistakes without realizing what's going on. So the next one is a small improvement, where when you're using Flyway to control multiple schemas, before we would fail if one of the schemas already existed, and now Flyway will just create the schemas that need to be created. So if you have 1 schema that's already there and 2 that don't exist, then Flyway will create those 2 and move on. And then finally, this is one that has been around for a while, and the idea is to use the placeholder values when calculating the checksum for repeatable migrations. And the impact that has is that it allows you to you will rerun repeatable migrations when placeholder values change, which doesn't happen at the moment because we at the moment calculate the checksum before placeholder replacement takes place. So this doesn't apply to version migrations because that wouldn't make much sense, but and hopefully it will have a smooth transition from existing repeatable migrations that have already been applied. So we've taken that into account as well. And it should be pretty much invisible to the user that that's going to happen. But we will start considering checksums after placeholder replacement from version 6.2 onwards. I think that's it. I'm going to hand over to Mikhail now, I think.
Yep, cool. So I'm going to do a quick tutorial of a couple of options that are currently available in Flyway. They're not new, but we thought we would draw some attention to them and show how they can be useful. So the two options I'm going to talk about are cleanOnValidationError and cleanDisabled. So the first one, cleanOnValidationError. So what this does is it says if you get a validation error, then Flyway will automatically call the clean command. And that is useful in development if you're going to be doing a fair bit of trial and error, making some mistakes. It's helpful to, instead of having to keep manually cleaning, to just have Flyway manually go ahead, clean, try again. So I've got a fairly simple workflow to show you how that can simplify things. I have two migrations, two version migrations. This one is going to create a table called books, and this one is going to add some data to it. So just make sure my Flyway environment is set up correctly. I'll do a Flyway info. You can see these two are pending. I'll do a Flyway migrate. And you can see that it's produced an error. So why is that? Well, I've made a typo in this migration script. It says insert into book values. It should say insert into books. So if I change that and do another Flyway migrate, you get a validation error saying, oh, version 2's failed, because Flyway's already inserted a failed entry for v2 in the schema history. So now I have to manually go and clean and then try and migrate again. So this, could be a fairly common problem you encounter when you're developing, just typos or various other bugs. So what you can do is set this cleanOnValidationError to true. And if I do a Flyway migrate, now Flyway's gone and run that for me. I didn't have to manually clean, and I can now query that, and you can see the output. It also means I can say, update this script and say I wanted to add another book. So I can add another entry here. And then I'll go and do another migrate. Again, because the script has changed, a validation error has occurred, so Flyway's done the clean. And if I run this query, you can see the extra entry is there. So that's the cleanOnValidationError. The other option is cleanDisabled. So this is sort of the opposite of cleanOnValidationError in that you want to set this true on if you have a sensitive environment, so your production environment, to make sure you don't accidentally clean. It's sort of a, it's just a bit of security. It's to avoid sort of making silly mistakes. So again, if I go and change this to add another entry and I do a migrate, I should get an error saying, oh, you can't clean because cleanDisabled is on. And then if I do a manual clean, again, you get the same error. So that's it for the tutorial. Yeah, just to show you that these features exist. They're documented on the website in more detail, and feel free to get in contact with any more questions or clarifications. Cool, so now we can go back to the presentation. We're going to talk about, Julie's going to talk a bit about database support documentation.
Cool, thank you. So one of the requests we get quite a lot on our GitHub issues is, why doesn't Flyway support my favorite database? Now, we do go through the DB Engine's rankings reasonably often to see what is out there being used a lot. And if you go to that site, you'll find listings of hundreds of databases. There is really more than anyone could keep up with. But in principle, Flyway can work with any database that supports a JDBC connection. we have various people who have taken the open source version of the source code and written what they need to do to support their particular flavor of database, even though it's not one that we have plans to support formally in the full-blown product, at least for the time being. Plus, when people have done that, submitted pull requests, it obviously then makes it easier for us to adopt support for their database in future if there turns out to be demand for it. So what we're doing at the moment is writing up a complete guide to how do I go about adding support for my favorite database into Flyway. The idea is it makes it much easier for people to contribute, and hopefully in doing so we make it rather more explicit what criteria we have for accepting people's pull requests. So essentially we're looking at the quality of the code, but we're also looking at the testability of it. We have a big test suite here. We run it on on-premise databases by firing up Docker images if they're available, and it's certainly true that they're not available for some databases, which makes that testing that much harder for us. And for cloud services, we would normally need some sort of trial account with the cloud provider so we can run tests from time to time without a continually ongoing cost. So we don't need to keep the account up and running all the time, but it still has to be testable. So can you go to the next slide? Right, so this is a quick snapshot of the documentation. It will be going live on our website when we do the 6.2 release. Hopefully it gives you everything you'll need. So what you need to get prepared, a JDBC driver for your database so we can actually physically make a connection, and an IDE. We recommend IntelliJ, it's what we use, and we found it to be very good. And then from that, giving you very clear and detailed instructions of all the things you need to add to the Flyway code base to customize it for your particular database. Every database turns out to be different, even in quite minor ways, and Flyway needs to know all the details of how to understand the SQL migrations that you write, down to the level of which character do I use to demarcate strings, to demarcate separate statements. It needs to know how to create tables, drop tables, create schemas and drop schemas so that it can do cleans and create a history table. And you'll find everything there that you need to do. If you just follow it through to the end, you should then be able to get Flyway up and running with your favorite database. And if you do that, we would love to hear from you. And we do accept pull requests from time to time. We would love to be, we'd love to go through what you've done, and maybe we will see your database supported formally by the full Flyway product. Okay, back to Mikhail.
Cool. Yes, so after Flyway 6.2, we will have a period of planning for what we're going to do in the next release. We call this 6.x. We're likely to have at least one or two more patch fixes as bug reports come in, either older bugs or ones that are introduced in 6.2. We're going to triage that from the 6.x GitHub milestone, which is publicly available. So you can see the sorts of things we're considering after the 6.2 is out. So if you have any thoughts or comments on that, you know, that's publicly available. So feel free to have a look and contact us if you have any questions. Cool, we have a time for Q&A if we've got any questions from viewers.
I'm just checking the question box. Nothing from the attendees yet, but we'll just give it a couple seconds.
While we wait, I have a question. Actually, it's not really a question, it's more of a request. The documentation that we've just been through, both for adding the supporting new databases and also for the config preferences for clean. Can we add the link to those in the video description below when this video goes up?
Yep, I can pop one in. Okay. Actually, let's just go in the chat. How do we pop this in there?
So we can do that at the end when we add the video to YouTube. It's also in the chat window for anyone who's watching.
Yeah.
So thanks, Julia.
It's not live yet, but it will be as soon as 6.2 is released.
Perfect.
Doesn't look like there's any questions from any of the live attendees, so we could probably move on.
Cool. Okay. Yes, so our next steps, we are going to finish up and ship Flyway 6.2. That will hopefully be either this week or early next week. We're going to then triage Flyway 6x, possibly planning a small patch release if needed for bug fixes. And we're also going to publish the database support documentation. Yeah, so that is basically it for this office hours. There's some links here for the 6.2 and the 6x milestones. Feel free to give us some feedback on Twitter or by email. The next office hours, we will announce that on Twitter. The date is to be confirmed, but it's probably a similar cadence to the previous ones. Yeah. Anyone else have anything else to say?
All good for me. Yeah.
Nope.
Cool. Okay. Well, thanks for watching, everyone.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the demos.
Bye.
See you later.